Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. Ukrainian President Zelensky says a draft peace plan would freeze fighting on current lines, does not require Ukraine to formally renounce its NATO bid and could include demilitarized zones. He says elections would follow a deal, a leaders' meeting is needed on territory and a nuclear plant, and Kyiv awaits a Russian response. 2 police officers are killed in an overnight explosion in Moscow after an explosive device is triggered as they approach a suspicious person, investigators say. The blast occurs near the site where a Russian general was killed earlier this week, raising security concerns in the capital. Ukrainian drone attacks target Moscow overnight, with Russia saying air defences shot down several drones and no immediate damage was reported in the capital. Debris from a downed drone sparks a fire at an industrial site in the Tula region, as Moscow says more than 170 Ukrainian drones are intercepted. The US State Department says it will deny visas to 5 people, including a former EU commissioner, accusing them of pressuring American social media platforms to suppress certain viewpoints. The former EU tech chief rejects the claims as a witch hunt. Venezuela tells the UN Security Council that the United States is waging an unofficial war to remove its government and pursue what it calls continental ambitions across Latin America. Caracas warns it is only the first target of a broader strategy. Thailand and Cambodia agree to hold a meeting of defence officials to try and revive a months-old ceasefire as border fighting enters a 3rd week with at least 80 people dead. The US Supreme Court refuses to let President Donald Trump deploy National Guard troops to the Chicago area. The justices leave in place a lower court order blocking the deployment, while a legal challenge by Illinois and local officials continue. Belgium formally joined South Africa's case at the International Court of Justice, alleging Israel is committing genocide in the Gaza Strip. The court says Belgium has filed a declaration of intervention in the proceedings. Now, our top story of the hour. We start in Europe, and the French government has condemned a US visa ban on Thierry Breton, former European Commissioner and key architect of the EU's Digital Services Act. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot called the move strongly unacceptable after the Trump administration imposed bans on Breton and other European figures. The US claims these individuals are involved in censoring American social media platforms. Breton, who helped drive the EU's regulations, defended the Digital Services Act, calling it a democratic decision with no extraterritorial reach. He also criticised the visa ban, questioning whether it was a return to McCarthy-style tactics. Joining us now is Peter Baum. He is the editor of the Weekly Blitz and he joins us live from London. Peter, thank you very much for joining us in this discussion. Peter, of course, the United States tech has a foothold in Europe, and of course we now know how much tech and social media does indeed influence our lives in the modern world. Who do you think is right in this scenario? Of course, the United States is protected by the First Amendment, which of course is free speech. However, there are restrictions when it comes to hate speech within the European Union. And so the United States has put in sanctions on EU officials for policing this. How do you think this might develop? And do you think that the United States was right for placing sanctions upon these officials?
Good morning, Thomas, to you. First of all, let's be direct. Is the United States right? No, but fully understandable. And this is a case where the censors themselves are being censored. Now, the ban is on 5 EU bureaucrats. let's bear in mind that none of these officials have been elected. They've all just been given positions in EU organisations, in this case, the digital services industry. So they're unelected, and they have definitely imposed censorship on a certain viewpoint emanating from US social media platforms. And if that viewpoint doesn't interact or is similar to their own ideology, then they come down hard on those US platforms. The ideology that they seek and have successfully striven to censor is the, let's say, the conservative pro-Trump uh, bloc. But in Europe themselves, they've been quite happy to allow hate speech on digital platforms, which, for example, is can be construed as anti-Semitic, anti-Judeo-Christian values. So those being censored themselves are guilty of censorship, and they are coming from one viewpoint which they do allow, and in many instances, numerous instances, I should say, is hateful speech. But as long as it's ideologically connected to their own view of the world, that's acceptable. As soon as the hate speech comes, in their view, comes from those platforms, individuals, organisations, etc., politicians, that is at odds with their view of the world, then that's when they come down hard. So we do want to see free speech globally, and we do want to see hate speech stamped upon, but we don't. But we must be consistent. And unfortunately, I think it's the five EU officials who've been not given visa rights, only look at it from one particular ideological angle, which is a very, let's say, left-wing, progressive, anti-Zionist, some might even say anti-Semitic, anti-Trump bloc. So if we had consistency, all well and good, we don't, and I think that's why the Trump administration is behaving as it is.
How damaging is this for US and EU relations? Of course, we've seen a bit of a down spiral when it comes to the relations between Europe overall, really, and the United States. Of course, in Donald Trump's national security strategy, he's labelled Europe as being invaded and raised all sorts of alleged problems with the continent. Do you expect further movements from the Trump administration when it comes to sanctioning European countries, fellow members of NATO, of course, and when it comes to these bans against current and former European officials?
Yeah, that's a good question, Thomas. The US-EU relations are at a very low point, very low ebb, mainly based on two issues. The first one is three issues, I should say. The way the EU have supported and not supported Ukraine. In other words, given political support to Ukraine, but at the same time buying Russian oil, so prolonging the war. The second thing is the way the European NATO allies contribute so little to NATO, and the US has borne that burden for decades. And the third thing is the way Trump has clamped down on administration and the way the EU have not. So those three issues, which Trump has specified, have really brought the relations down to a very low ebb. The banning of these five unelected bureaucrats, frankly, will do no further harm to relations to what is already done. They're five people, most of whom Europe hasn't even heard of. They may have heard of Thierry Breton, but certainly the other four characters are just really minor. They might be have important roles in the organisation they're in, but they're certainly minor bureaucrats of no particular importance. So what I'm saying to your question is that relations won't deteriorate further just because the Trump administration has put a ban on these 5 individuals. They're already at a very low ebb, and the only way they will improve is if Trump sees that Europe are improving their policies towards immigration, more defence spending, etc.
Yes, Peter, do stay with us as we have further news updates coming for our viewers. And we move over to Turkey, and their Interior Minister, Ali Yerlikaya, has said that the voice recorder and black box on a jet carrying the Libyan chief of staff was found after it crashed in the outskirts of Ankara. Turkey's head of communications has said that the private jet reported an electrical failure and requested an emergency landing shortly before crashing near Ankara, and the Dassault Falcon 50 jet took off from Ankara's Esenboga airport. Let's listen into what Turkey's Interior Minister had to say.
Enkaz alanında saat 02:45'te uçağa ait ses kayıt cihazı, saat 03:20'de ise kara kutu bulunmuştur. Bunların inceleme ve değerlendirme süreçleri ilgili kurumlarca başlanmıştır. Ayrıca Libya Savunma Bakanlığı tarafından görevlendirilen 5'i hayatını kaybedenlerin yakını olmak üzere 14 kişilik heyet ile Libya İçişleri Bakanlığı'ndan görevlendirilen 8 kişi, yani toplam 22 kişilik Libya ekibi Ankara'ya intikal etmiştir.
Peter joins us once again. A devastating day for Libya. What more can you tell us about this crash that's happened just coming out of the Turkish capital today?
Interesting one, Thomas, and I've been trying to do some research and coming up with very little, but this is, I think there's more to come on this, but this is what the feedback is so far. First of all, the visit by the Libyans to Turkey was kept under the, forgive the pun, kept under the radar. It was a very secretive meeting. When the plane crashed, the news came out. Then we started trying to analyse from our friends in Turkey and North Africa what was going on here. And apparently the meeting didn't go very well at all. There was a lot of friction between the Libyan party and the Turkish Foreign Ministry and Erdogan. Erdogan sees himself as the new leader of the Muslim world, and is trying to put his footprint on many countries, Libya being one. And the Libyans seemingly want to, or wanted to delay or dilute the Turkish presence in the country. So, as I said, from what we gather, it was a very fraught meeting. Now, when the plane crashed, there was all kinds of speculation on social media as whether this was the hand of Turkey doing this, and we have no reason to go down that route. But in the next few days, I guess we will understand what the meeting was all about, why apparently it went so wrong, and what happened to the crash. Because don't forget, this was carrying top people in the Libyan government, and it seems very odd that whether human error or technical malfunction, that the plane should go down. So the details behind the story are still very, very vague, Thomas, and unfortunately I can't give you and your viewers any more than that, other than the speculation that has been fed back to me. Hopefully in the next 48 hours we'll find out more. But apparently the meeting between the two parties did not go down well at all, as Turkey sought to have a bigger imprint on the internal affairs of Libya.
Indeed, Peter, I'm sure we will find out more in those coming hours. Thank you very much for joining us as always. It's been a pleasure. We now move on, and a Chinese spokesperson has slammed Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Party authorities, led by Lai Ching-te, for selling out Taiwan's competitive industries. Spokesperson of the State Council Taiwan Affairs Office, Peng Quiying, made the remarks at a regular press conference in Beijing. He has said that the United States is providing a pet stage for Taiwan's separatists, adding that democratic supply chain is Lai Ching-te's authorities' violation of economic rules and market rules and shameless accommodation of external force. Joining us now is Roger Liu, an assistant professor at National Sun Yat-sen University, joining us live from Kaohsiung in Taiwan. Thank you very much for joining us. China accuses the Democratic Progressive Party of selling out Taiwan's competitive industries here. What exactly is Beijing referring to?
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
Well, I think this is part of what they call the United Front tactics, because for the past few months, actually what's happening in Taiwan is that the US, especially the Donald Trump administration and some key player in the Donald Trump administration, try to get Taiwan to invest more in the semiconductor sector from Taiwan, especially centered the TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. So the company actually they promised to invest at the total amount of 300 billion US dollars in the years to come in the United States. And at the same time, there is a sentiment of anti-US among some people in Taiwan, saying that actually US tried to hollow out Taiwan by relocate Taiwan's most important semiconductor manufacturing capacity from Taiwan to the US. So what China has been doing is to create and fanning and flaming this kind of sentiments, trying to create impression that the Chinese government actually has been thinking from Taiwanese people's interest to protect Taiwan. So they try to create some kind of cleavage between some people in Taiwan against the US.
Yes, indeed. And is this about Taiwan's semiconductor sector, or does China see broader economic alignment with the United States as the problem?
Well, I think the semiconductor will be a problem because, if you check for the past few months, the focus of the US-China trade conflict or technology conflict actually centered on semiconductors. Well, the US has been imposed different kinds of export control on specific kind of chips, especially centered around AI, because the US tried to stop China from gaining more advanced capability to train their AIs. So they try to use export control as a curbing mechanism for that. However, recently Donald Trump just released the control of the H200 made by NVIDIA, the second best chips among all in the training of AI to China. So he opened this up. But for others, they still remain, the US administration still remain closed. So I think Donald Trump wants to use it as a leverage for further negotiations, because China still control the rare earth and they are still in the negotiation process. So it's like come and go on and off process between the two. So they try to, so that's why China tried to leverage on the Taiwanese side to see whether they can find some loopholes.
And from Taipei's perspective, is this about selling out or about economic security and diversification away from Beijing?
Well, it's complicated because, of course, not only Taiwan, but also Japan and South Korea, there has been an increased level of anti-US sentiments or some US suspicion, feelings. But because US actually has a lot to be invested in the US outside of the country, and that will actually create some economic effect back in the home countries. But the Taiwanese people know that to protect Taiwan from China, we need the U.S. And U.S. is the only country that have this kind of, capacity to protect Taiwan. So we try to maintain the balance between the two. At the same time, we try to keep the anti-U.S. statement at the lower level, but at the same time, we try to make sure that Taiwan still have the core capacities remain in Taiwan rather than relocated all to the U.S. at the same time.
Yes, thank you very much, Roger Liu, for joining us here on NewsX World. It's been a pleasure to have you on the programme.
Thank you.
We now move on, and the United States is facing a diplomatic challenge as US President Donald Trump recalls 13 ambassadors, leaving more than half of sub-Saharan Africa without top-level representation. This move complicates US efforts in a region plagued by coups and conflicts. The Trump administration has shifted focus in Africa from aid to trade, aiming to compete with China's growing influence. Critics say the recall undermines diplomacy and could hurt America's efforts to mediate peace and trade. Meanwhile, US envoys to countries like Rwanda, Nigeria and Niger are among those affected. The State Department has not confirmed whether replacements will be appointed. We move on now, and China has strongly opposed the United States' plan to impose tariffs on Chinese semiconductor imports. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson called the move an indiscriminate use of tariffs and criticised Washington's unreasonable suppression of Chinese industries. Lin Juan urged the US to correct its wrong practices and warned that China would take action to protect its rights if the US presses forward with these measures. This comes as the Trump administration has announced it will impose tariffs on Chinese semiconductor imports over concerns about Beijing's pursuit of chip industry dominance. However, the action will be delayed until June 2027. This follows a year-long investigation into Chinese export of older technology chips to the United States. The US says China's actions restrict US commerce, but China has strongly opposed the tariffs, warning they could destabilize global supply chains. Meanwhile, tensions with Beijing have also led to Chinese export curbs on rare earth metals, essential for global tech production. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.